get into an interactive session. My name is Betty Kiptum. Now, Kenya, like most African countries, have embarked on labor export. And what is the right way to do it? What can countries do to make sure that their people are going out there, getting the jobs they require, and they are still remaining dignified? To have this conversation with me is Ida Awel. She is a Chief Technical Advisor at the International Labour Organization's Better Regional Migration Management Program. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
You're very much welcome. Kenya, like many other countries, as I've just said, is embarking on export of its labor. Is there a right way to do this?
Definitely. Actually, labor migration needs to be managed properly so that the migrants workers are protected, but as well as remittance coming back in the country will contribute to sustainable development in the country of origin as well. So yes, having the right policy in place is one of the first critical aspect, which is good to know that Kenya have already adopted a labor migration policy. So it's a very positive forward. Then we also have to capacitate the migrants. Having the right skills, of course, for the job that they will undertake in destination country is critical. And as again, Kenya have been embarking on different bilateral labor agreement, as you know. That is also another important and positive step forward for the protection of migrant worker, but as well as to facilitate the labor migration. So it's definitely a win-win situation if labor migration is managed properly.
Right. Let's talk more about the skilling bit of it, because Kenya has a very tech-savvy population, and the government has been going into a technical vocational training to equip its people with more skills. What more can be done to equip them better so that they are right for the export market?
I think one critical thing that can be done is to kind of assess the market out there, because so that at the end of the day, one of the positive aspects of migration is to ensure that the labor market supply and demand is met, to balance the labor market supply and demand. So it's good to forecast, for example, for the next 10 years, what is the sectors that's required in the different countries where the Kenyan government would like to send their migrant workers, or where Kenyans generally would like to go. So that will be one of the first steps, I will say. Then based on that, of course, to be it skilling them, reskilling them, because they might have certain skills, but you can reskill them to fit into the labor market here in Kenya as well, but as well as abroad. So reskilling is also another critical aspect. Maintaining the quality of education is also good. It's an important aspect because, as you know, of course, with technology and everything, the competition is also high in the global market to access the global market. So it's important that we are competitive in the international market, having the best qualification and education system in the country as well. And I think Kenya positively is making a very positive step forward in that regard. Just yesterday I was with the University of Mount Kenya, and they were telling us they already have agreement with the country, the UK, universities in the UK, as well as the US in terms of certification, so recognizing their certification. And I know the government of Kenya, especially through the leadership of the Ministry of Labor, has also been pushing this in different countries. So that's also a very positive step to ensure that at least the certification being obtained by Kenyans in Kenya is recognized in destination countries. So you're moving in the right direction.
Right. Bilateral agreements. There's signing a bilateral agreement, and then there's implementation of that bilateral agreement. What is Kenya's position currently?
Kenya have signed a number of bilateral agreements, as you know, both in the Gulf as well as in Europe. So some has started implementation, some is in the process of implementation. But the Kenyan government, again, another positive step they have taken is assigning labor attaches. At the end of the day, one of the responsibility of this labor attaches is to make sure that this bilateral labor agreement is being implemented. Of course, in the development process as well, it's important that the bilateral labor agreement is aligned to international labor standards. In this regard, the ILO have supported the government in providing technical support and to make sure that these bilateral labor agreements have been aligned. So yes, the signing is one step, but of course the most critical aspect And of course, what would be challenging is in terms of implementation and monitoring of this PLA. So I mean, they are in the right direction, but more needs to be done in terms of implementation and monitoring of this PLMA. But this is the challenge that's facing not only Kenya, almost all countries in Eastern Africa as well.
Let's talk about an issue that is very close to Kenyans' hearts. I mean, some people have sent their people out there. Some have come back in coffins. Others have come back with allegations of abuse while working in these foreign countries. What is the ILO doing to better the situation for these immigrants who are working?
Of course, as ILO, as a normative organization, one of the major work we have done over the years and will continue to do is, of course, the development of international labor standard. And we have, I mean, all international labor standards do apply to migrant workers. So, of course, as you know, the international labor standard looks at rights, protection issues, wage issues, working hours. So we have over 190 conventions globally. But we also, all these conventions do apply to migrant workers. So as long as a given country has ratified this convention, they have obligation to implement it as well. So that is one way. Then we also have actually two specific conventions looking at migration. We call it Convention 97, Convention 143. Moreover, for migrants going out of Kenya, and not only Kenya, and from East Africa generally, of course, the Gulf is mostly concentrated in the domestic work sector, as you know. And we do have specific convention to protect the rights of the domestic worker. We have Convention 189, which looks at domestic workers. So we do promote the ratification of this convention, both from the country of origin side, but as well as from the country of destination side. At the end of the day, of course, as a country of origin, I think it's critical you practice what you preach as well. When you're trying to protect your citizens abroad, you also have to protect the rights of other citizens in your country. So we do promote that. And for Kenya, actually, they have ratified both conventions, the Migration Convention, both 97 and 143. So that's a very plus. So that's one of the work of the ILO. And when there is a concern, and when, of course, at the end of the day, the ILO have a supervisory body as well. So when there's a concern by government or workers, employers, as you know, ILO is a tripartite organization, they can file a complaint. So if the ILO will do the necessary due diligence in terms of assessing what the situation is. But of course, as I said, the complaint, because there is reporting required from every country once you ratify a convention. So when there's issues and the concern that is being raised by the supervisory body, the ILO will do that investigation and see, and of course discuss with the relevant government to make sure that this is ratified.
Let's talk about
rectified, more like.
Right. Thank you so much for your comment on that. Let's talk about the regional labor mobility frameworks. Of course, 1.4 billion people on the continent, on the African continent, and that is a market that is increasingly working towards making more people, work across countries, work across regions to build the economy. So how can we enhance these mobility frameworks?
I think if you look at it from like 10 years, 20 years back in the line, we're doing pretty well. Of course, there's a lot of mobility framework in the continent. We do have, of course, in particular for Kenya, we have the EAC, the EAC Common Market Protocol, which has been signed since 2010 and has been implemented actually. That's why you can easily, freely move around the East Africa regions, which some of us doesn't have the luxury to do so. But Kenya is also a member, of course, of IGAD. And IGAD have also developed a free movement protocol, I believe it was in 2021. In terms of ratification, I think it hasn't gone at the pace that we would have liked to see, but it is moving a bit, and definitely the IGAD secretary has been working a lot on this. And we as ILO do have a project working with IGAD as well on this free movement protocol to support member states to make sure that this is ratified. So it's ratification and implementation is not always going at a fast pace, but at least we do have the relevant protocols. But beyond, I think, our region in Eastern Horn of Africa, we also have the AU Free Movement Protocol. So our hope, inshallah, in 2063, as you know, we have the Agenda 2063, this would have been adapted by all member states, and we all will be moving and establishing ourselves anywhere in the continent.
Right. As we come to a close of the conversation, what would be your rallying call to different stakeholders to support labor migration? Okay,
thank you. I think this is important. I think for different, when it comes to labor migration, there's different stakeholders involved. Of course, first is the government putting in place the right policies. And ongoing, because the issue of labor migration is dynamic, so the need for ongoingly updating these policies as they see fit, but also making sure that it's aligned to international labor standards. The other is ratification of relevant conventions and harmonization of policies as well, because sometimes policy and education need to talk to the labor law, to the employment policy, so that there's a need for harmonization of policies as well. I think that's the major role, of course, not only developing the policy, but make sure that it's being implemented as well, and developing the right laws in the country as well. I think for I will say employment agencies, what I will advise is to make sure that they do, because we do have fair recruitment practices is critical. So it's to implement fair recruitment practices in their processes. Of course, they're business entities. We understand they're there to make profit as well, but we're not talking about commodities here. We're talking about human beings. So let's treat them with dignity and what do you call it? Operate within the ambit of the law of the country, but as well as international labor standards and fair recruitment practices. But most importantly, for the migrants themselves, workers. One is enhance your skills so that you're competitive in the international market. But the other thing I think is critical is, if you have to go, it's your right. Mobility is a right? But make sure you migrate regularly. So we have to be very cautious in terms of irregular migration, especially nowadays we see a lot of scamming through technology, internet, as you know. With all the positive aspect that comes with internet, there's also a negative aspect. So please be cautious, especially the youth. Be cautious, make sure that you get the verified information, the right information from the relevant sources, such as government, like the National Employment Authority and others, so that when you migrate, your rights are protected. And my other message for migrants is, even, God forbid, you're in a situation in irregular status in a destination country, you do have rights. Before you're migrants, you're a human being, so every human being has a right. So make sure you know your rights before you migrate. This is the major message, but last but not least, to you guys, the media. Right. You also have a role to play. My plea with the media is in terms of, one, to definitely inform, because you're the one who can, you guys have power. You have the, you can create the awareness that we want, especially, as I said, to promote the regular pathways and discourage the irregular migration. And so we hope that we can do that role even better. Exactly. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking with us. I have been speaking with Ida Awel. She is the Chief Technical Advisor at the International Labour Organization's Better Regional Migration Management Program, focusing on making sure that labor migration is done right. And of course, she has advised that for people who are looking to migrate on a labor status, you make sure that you do it legally. And of course, know your rights before you do that. And of course, watch out for scammers online. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Betty Kiptum. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Bye-bye.